And thanks for joining us on PM Express. I'm pretty sure you may have noticed by now that the conversation around the wage increase is live. It is the big wage debate. I can actually say, without any shadow of contradiction, that this is possibly going to be one of the most noticeable, most important, most controversial wage debates we'll have for the rest of the year going into 2023. Because of the very peculiar economic times you're in, it is going to be one of those wage debates that will generate a lot of heat and a lot of controversy. It's just starting after the announcement of the new minimum wage, and it is getting a bit of traction here. We're going to look at the demands versus the reality. The demands of the workers versus what the reality says. This is the big wage debate. It affects everyone, almost everybody. We're talking about the economic challenges that we are facing currently. It just raises the obvious question, are wages matching the cost of living that you are having to bear? And that's what the workers have started, and that's what we're going to go into right now. And the starting point from the workers is 60%. They want a 60% increase in the base pay for 2023. And the question jumps at you, obviously, which is 60% being realistic, considering where we are tonight? It is a question that jumps at you. But then if you also flip the coin, why not 60%? Why is that not realistic? Because if you look at where inflation is, just above 40%, and many say that is conservative if you look at that number, and how everything else has gone up, the twin crisis of inflation and the depreciation of the cedi, then this is being fair, right? But if you're also going to negotiations, you don't want to start with a lower number and end at a place that will not necessarily serve the interest of the people you represent when you're talking about the workers. And that's why they put for a 60% increase is what they're asking for. In real terms, though, the increase you're asking for is moving it from the current 3,000. This is an average, on the average, what the public sector worker earns. On the average, is 3,672 cedis. The one that moved to 5,303 cedis. That is a 60% increase. And if you look at the current, that's what it is here. And you want to jump to this. Is that asking too much? Is a fundamental question. Is that asking too much? But then if you ask that question, then you need to also ask the other question. Can the economy bear this particular cost? Can the economy survive if government is going to find money to pay workers this basic amount of money, this average salary increase? We're going to be asking those questions tonight. I will tell you why this is going to be difficult. The next few weeks, there'll be some really difficult conversations between government and labor on agreeing what is fair. Now, if you look at what has happened now with the conversation around the base pay, it really started the day after the minimum wage increase was announced. And for many observers of the space, an increase in the minimum wage is almost always a trigger to a base pay negotiation. If you've given us a 10% increase plus COLA of 15%, and COLA is a cost of living allowance, which comes down to, say, a total of some 25%, then we expect something even more when it comes to our base pay. And that's the basic point for the workers, right? That they got the hint that government is willing to increase, but how much is the question. Government doesn't dispute that base pay needs to go up. The question is how much? Is it 60%? Is it 40% to be in sync with the rate of inflation, or what is it? And how do you determine that number? The workers will tell us, and we'll speak to a labor expert. And if you look at the minimum wage over the period, and minimum wage, by the way, it's not the wage you earn at the end of the month. People earn that, but it's a wage below which nobody should earn. And if you compute the new minimum wage of 14.88 pesos, just over 400 cedis a month. So nobody can survive on that currently in the midst of this economic crisis. But there are people earning that, by the way, I must say. But if you see that point here, there's been increases over the years. 2022 increases is seen there. There's a slight 10%. increase in the number. It's not much. It's not much. But the real conversation begins when you begin to look at the minimum wage and say, well, that must indicate what my salary should be, and I'm expecting an increase of a certain amount. You look at the minimum wage in real terms, but in percentage terms, you begin to see that it has been on the downward trajectory in percentage terms, right? And the steepest decline we saw in percentage terms was in 2021 when COVID was in full swing and the grip of it was being felt pretty hard. And then it began to climb in percentage terms after 2021, as we saw there when they agreed that increase, and then it went up all the way, as we've seen that a 10% increase from 7.98%. And so it's going up, but is it going up fast enough in percentage terms? It's a question that the workers have asked. But the important thing to note, as we talk about the minimum wage, and this is a reality of most workers in the public sector and workers generally in Ghana, is that many are living below the poverty line. If you earn anything on the, a day of $2.15, according to the World Bank, you are just on the poverty line. If you earn anything below that, you are below the poverty line. You are extremely poor. And look at the gap that you see here. That gap tells a story. This is where we are currently, even with the increase in the minimum wage. If you convert it into dollar, as people now joke with, they say you begin to cry, shed tears of blood, because you're talking about $1.13, significantly way below what it should be when you look at the subject of what the World Bank says should be the poverty line. So people are significantly way below this poverty line here. This is the reality of many, many Ghanaians below the poverty line. That is alarming, and that is factoring into the 60% that the workers are asking for in terms of the base pay. They want to lift workers significantly above this poverty line, somewhere here in an upward trajectory. But can the economy manage that increase without collapsing further? Because we are in a crisis already. It's a big conversation that we need to have. And when you begin to look at what the rate of depreciation of your currency is, plus the inflation, if you box that into it, what it means to your salary, you begin also to appreciate the worker side of the story, right? And this is a very important statistic and data that brings the story home. So the effect of inflation on salaries has been dire, has been pretty grim. If you were earning 3,000 cedis last year, right? Last year, October. This year, October, your salary hasn't changed. But because of inflation, in reality, you are taking home 1,788. Do you know how much value you've lost on that salary you take home? And that is if it's 3,000. We're talking about the average. We just, assume numbers here, average. You've lost 1,212. So you're actually still taking 3,000 CD salary, but in effect, your salary is worth only 1,788. As much as 1,212 is gone, wiped off by inflation. Those who earn 5,000, who think, I'm okay, I'm in the middle class. Yes, Ghana, when you earn 5,000, you consider yourself middle class. The reality is, the inflation reality is that you are actually taking home 2,980 CDs. As much as 2,000 CDs is gone, is wiped off. Inflation has wiped off that amount from your salary. The higher your salary, the more inflation is eating away into that salary. And that tells a story. So you begin to appreciate why they're asking for 60%. If inflation is a 40.4%, you have to factor that in to whatever salary you're taking right now and just discount that. So if you're earning 5,000, just subtract 2,000 cedi from it. Your real salary is 2,980. So that begins to hit home. So those who are earning below 2,000 cedis, it is quite a dire situation. They are actually earning just in the region of just 1,000 cedis a month. That is the reality of the workers. And they are saying you need 60%. Because 60% then will take you so we are talking about in essence, if you give them 50%, 60% increase, even if government agrees 60%, in reality, the increase they're getting is some 18, this is close to 90. It's not even 20% increase. In reality, that's how much you get on your salary because inflation will take away 40.4 of that 60, right? That brings you down to what? 19.6 or so percent increase in salary. That is an interesting point that the workers are using in the negotiations that they have with government, right? And then you consider the government angle too. Look at this from the finance minister's point of view. And finance minister will pull up this table to the workers in their meeting and say, listen, our wage bill is climbing. It's becoming very, unsustainable. We cannot be doing this to our economy because of that 35.84 billion cedis is what we are spending on salaries alone. Can the economy carry it? And let me put this in context for you, see why this is a big problem for the finance ministry. Because this is the amount that as a country, the total revenue, everything else that we make as a country, the amount, the revenues that multimedia is paying, the revenue that you pay, including your income tax, everything, is 100 billion cedis. That's all that this country generates in terms of revenue. Out of the 100 billion cedis, compensation to pay salaries alone is 3.35 billion, right? And then interest payments is 37 billion. So we're talking about 35% of that is going to pay compensation. This is before we talk about the potential increases in salaries and base pay. And then you have interest payments at 37%. And then you have other items of 27 billion. So the money is gone. By the time you take away compensation and interest, the money is gone. The rest of the money, what is left for roads, schools, water, etc.? Nothing. That's how we've been borrowing. We've been borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And so when you increase this line item, which the workers are expecting an increase, then our current situation becomes worse. And I wonder, the IMF conversations we are having, how is all these conversations factoring into it? The finance minister is preparing the budget that will be read hopefully on Thursday for 2023. Some agreement needs to be reached. I don't see how the finance minister prepares a budget and doesn't factor in how much he intends to spend on compensation for 2023. Considering that we are on borrowed time when it comes to this economy, awaiting an IMF bailout, something needs to give. Workers legitimately demanding an increase. Government says, hard numbers, I can't afford it. Okay. Where's the middle line? That's what we're going to be exploring tonight when my guests join me here on PM Express. This is a conversation you want to be part of because everybody is affected by this. Even if you're in the private sector, once the public sector workers secure a deal, well, it sends a signal to the private sector also to say, if government is agreeing, government that is in crisis, says is borrowing, can't afford, looking for a bailout, can agree an increase, then the private sector should even do more. So don't think this doesn't affect you. It is a big signal for the employers in the private sector also, watching what government will do and maybe using that as a signal and a basis for conversations in the private sector as well. So let's have this conversation after the break. Stay with me.